I want to go to Ed Henry at the White House because I am going to have to inject some politics in here, Ed. It's absolutely appropriate to do so, and it's in context. The president came up a little bit earlier, and he did, as I said earlier, what he had to do. He reassured the nation that justice will be done, and that's what everybody wants. However, there is pressure on President Obama, and I don't even know whether he knows it, because of the fiasco in Libya, which we still don't know. Nobody's been held accountable for it. That can't happen in Boston. And so he's got to know that the urgency here, he's got to get this, and the federal government has got to get this and get this solved fairly quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, look at this on a number of levels. What happened in Benghazi in September, you still do not really have anybody brought to justice yet, even though the president said immediately after they would be brought to justice. So he has that hanging out there.
Yep.
That was a terror attack on his watch. This is now another terror attack on his watch. He came out today in the briefing room. I was there, and he called it, in his opening line, the events in Boston. He did not call it terror. Now, critics, you're right, are immediately going to say, wait a second, why won't he call it what it is? I talked to his aides right after, and they immediately told me, it is a terror attack. We believe it was a terror attack. So I said, well, why didn't he say that? They believe inside the White House it makes no sense for the president to jump out ahead of the investigation when you've got the FBI and everyone else on the local and state level as well, trying to find out all this information. They say, look, it's obvious it was a terror attack because when several explosive devices go off, that by its nature is a terror attack, but they do not yet know whether it's a foreign attack, whether it came from Al-Qaeda or some other group, or whether it's homegrown in some sort of domestic source of terrorism. Nonetheless, they acknowledge to me in private, they know they're going to face criticism that he's not calling it terror when, meanwhile, Dianne Feinstein and others in his own party are out there on the record tonight saying it was terror.
You know what? That didn't bother me. I think the understated presentation, but firm, is what was appropriate there. That didn't bother me, and I think he made a mistake by calling it a tragedy. I don't like that. You know, a tragedy is a storm that comes in and wipes out your family in the house, or an accident that you have no control over. This isn't a tragedy. This is an act of war. That's what this is, whether it's domestic or foreign. Now, Mr. Obama basically is a guy who wants to be cool in all circumstances. Do I have him correctly there? He's very conscious of being cool. He doesn't show anger. Very rarely seen him show anger. But at a time like this, that's what is necessary. I can show anger because I don't have anything directly to do with the investigation. But he has to keep a cool head.
He does like to keep a cool head. One of the rare times that I saw him in covering him where he maybe, if you were to say lost his cool a little bit, was during the oil spill investigation when he was taking a lot of heat. You remember he did an interview with Matt Lauer and said something about kicking people's butts and whatnot because he realized at that moment the public, he was losing the public in terms of not showing that he cared, not showing he really wanted to get to the bottom of it. In this case, frankly, they compare it to the Bush administration days, and they think that President Bush, in some of his public pronouncements, got a little ahead of the situation, and they don't want to repeat that. And you're right, he does approach it where he wants to be the coolest guy in the room.
Right.
Sometimes that works, other times it might not.
Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes appropriate, sometimes it isn't. He's got to, once it gets to be defined, then show some anger. Then I would see. Now, the lead investigative agency is going to be the FBI. We're looking now at a picture of the dais where a press conference will be held momentarily, and it will be divided between the FBI and the local authorities in Boston. But the FBI, not Homeland Security, is the lead agency in this, right?
Right, the FBI, because they're going to be the lead law enforcement agency. They're the ones that coordinate the whole thing. And what's fascinating there as well is you have Robert Mueller, who, pardon me, has been on the job for several years, but is coming up. His term has been extended once, and now he's done in a few months. So this is going to be his last major investigation. He's already got one foot out the door. You have a completely new national security team here at the White House for the beginning of the second term. Chuck Hagel at Defense, John Kerry at State. John Brennan's left the White House and gone to the CIA. And so he's got this whole new group of people around him, the president, who are being tested here very quickly. Let's remember what we've been talking about, what you've been talking about in your show for weeks, is about immigration reform and gun control and the budget, and what's he going to do on a grand bargain? All of a sudden, all of that's on the back burner, Bill.
Right. I mean, the terrorism thing now becomes a major issue because this is the second time now we've been hit, 9/11, of course, being the first. The president basically is dependent now on Mueller and the FBI. And those guys are notoriously tight-lipped. See, this is going to be fascinating, and I want people to watch this starting tomorrow. Tonight it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to lay the groundwork for the rest of the week in our analysis and reportage. The public is going to demand quick answers. Like I just said with Peter King, hey, when you get briefed tomorrow, we want to know tomorrow night what they're telling you about it. And Congressman King is nice enough to commit to coming back on tomorrow night. But, you know, the FBI, they don't want to say anything because they, you know, if there's 5 or 6 people involved with this, they want to trace everybody back. But the public is demanding quick answers. So the president, again referencing Libya, is between a rock and a hard place here.
He is, because in terms of the Libya investigation, months and months have passed without the U.S. being able to crack that case. As you know, at the beginning of that, after Benghazi, the FBI hadn't even been to the consulate, hadn't been there for days, maybe weeks. They were very slow there. So there's going to be intense pressure, as you say, to make sure this time, when it's on the U.S. homeland in Boston, a major American city, that they're going to have to work a lot faster. Now, what I will say about information coming out, the FBI sometimes might be too tight-lipped to their detriment. On other times, though, as you know better than anyone, as you noted in the first 24 hours or so, the information may not really be pertinent in the investigation, because a lot of the early reports turned out to be false about which guy we're looking for, where he or she was. But you're right. After the first day or two, if they're not getting answers, there's going to be intense pressure.
When you are covering a story like this, tomorrow I assume Carney will come out and you'll be able to ask him questions, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you pull back a little because of the sensitivity of the situation?
No, I think we should be all over it. I mean, I remember when we were in a briefing after Osama bin Laden was caught. That was a much better circumstance, obviously, for the United States. But there were a lot of unanswered questions about what happened, how did we do it, and you've got to push just as hard, whether the outcome is good or, in this case, where there's a terror attack on American soil. The president's going to be held accountable for that. We've got to get to the bottom of it, but this has happened now on his watch, and they're going to have to explain not just what's happening in the investigation, but did they have any inkling of this at all? If not, why not? There are a lot of unanswered questions tonight, and Jay Carney, not just him, but the FBI, the Homeland Security Department, Janet Napolitano are going to face a lot of questions about what they knew and what they didn't know. And we should say, in fairness to them, obviously, this was said in the Bush administration when I was here, and should be said now, which is that for the Department of Homeland Security, still a relatively new federal agency post 9/11, as you noted, they have to be right 100% of the time. The terrorists only have to be right once, and all of a sudden we have a horrific scene. So there are a lot of terror attacks that were thwarted in the Bush administration and have been thwarted in this administration, but now this one was not. Why not is going to be a big question.
Yeah, particularly when the funerals of the children, one confirmed dead 8-year-old girl, but there are, we understand, 8 other children that have been injured or in the hospital. All right, we appreciate it, Ed, and we'll talk with you again tomorrow.